Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our shows, knowledgeable hosts, and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Well, hello there, world, and welcome to episode 95 of Untold Radio's Down South Anomalies. My name's Joe Katz.
And I'm Especia.
And we're here because we are part of the incredible Indigenous culture of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation.
That's right. We'd like
Sydney,
to
Australia.
Acknowledge
the elders, past, present, and emerging. All right.
Okay.
Now, tonight's episode is, well, it's critical transition.
It is.
And that's what's happening to us. We're in a state of shell shock at the moment because our lives are changing radically.
Flux.
And I know a lot of people's lives are changing out there, but Sydney, the city, has become too expensive for native Sydney-siders to live in.
Anyway.
And we're breaking down an entire warehouse we've lived in for 23 years with thousands of film reels. We're talking 16 mil, 35, tens of thousands of records and books. So
and magazines.
And lecture notes and slides.
And posters.
Yes.
And stuff we've collected over the years.
We are on the borderline of hoarders buried alive.
We have one foot in that camp and 1 foot distinctly.
And you know what? We were freaking out going, we have had so much work on our plate. We're so exhausted. We're so both strung out on lasers. I'm feeling like a 16-year-old boy who's been caught smoking behind the toilet sheds for collecting too much ephemera.
Smoking in the kitchen all the time.
Yeah. But it's really, but we know so many other people are going through so many worse things.
And we thought, oh, shall we just give this a break for a little bit until we get this? But you know what? Sometimes we need to do this. Well, sometimes you need, your routine to stay a little bit routine. So you do know, because it's like, okay, it's around the end of the week. We've got to get our podcast done, blah, 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 blah.
It's something regular in the midst of.
It anchors you to your reality.
Thank you,
was.
There it does.
And because we're going into a new reality and, we don't want it to be too blurred and too freaky for us. So this brings us back and
stabilizes us. Yeah,
anyway.
But unfortunately, you're not getting an interview. You are getting us.
Well, you're getting us, and you're going to get us for a short time. Well, shortish,
All right.
Anyway,
so
let's get into
entrainment.
Yes, entrainment
has many different phases, and feelings. Another term for it is biomusicology.
Okay.
Because there's rhythm involved, there's vibration involved. It is literally the rhythmic syncing of behavior.
Yep.
Not just human behavior.
No.
Organic living behavior.
Yes.
From the microcosm to the macrocosm.
Yes. But
everything seems to vibrate at certain times in sync. Now, evolution in the animal world shows this over and over again.
Yes.
But in the human world, we have contaminated this.
Well,
we've contaminated original thought.
We have.
From collective behavior. Collective behavior is incredibly different.
It is.
To individual thought or individual messages, misinformation shared with millions of others.
That's right.
Because there's a democratization when it comes to collective thinking.
There is. Where there isn't when you are all being told
what to do by one individual.
And, and that that mightn't be the truth. It mightn't be for our benefit. And
so
if someone's telling you something, they're telling you something for a reason.
What about the critical transition? What occurs the moment an avalanche begins?
Mm.
What occurs in a murmuration of starlings?
Oh, yes.
What occurs in a school of fish?
Yes.
And what is the physics involved?
And how they move.
And how did we fall down this rabbit hole? Well, thanks to an incredible doctor, an extraordinary book, Music and the Paranormal.
Yes.
I stumbled onto what is probably the smallest index in this encyclopedic dictionary of that extraordinary subject matter. And I must appraise the work of the late Dr. Scott Rogo, who actually was the man that kicked it off in terms of the Western world taking into consideration anomalous music. And that's what we were researching to begin with.
That's right.
But I stumbled onto this little reference to entrainment. Entrainment, excuse me. Possibly only on the borders of paranormality. So I have to thank Melvin J. Whelan for this incredible byline in our podcast today. It's the concept of musical entertainment whereby independent rhythmic processes react together in a seemingly mysterious way. This is manifested in the coordination that can be witnessed between groups of musicians, I apologize, or dancers when they function together as a whole, but without an obvious attempt to do so.
Right.
And certainly with musicians, there's practice, but there's also different hearing aspects. There's different neurological wiring. How do people get into perfect sync?
I know.
And it's through practice. But when you look at a school of fish, have they been going to training camp before they actually do that?
Not.
When we look at starlings in the skies, tens of thousands, millions of them.
Yes, I know. It's
how
quite
is
a
that
sight,
possible?
actually.
It really is a sight. Look, for further reference on this, the study of this phenomena has been researched at length by Martin Clayton. He is the professor of music at the Durham University in England. So I suggest Clayton, Clayton, Martin, punch in and put the word entrainment. And you might get some enlightenment. But it does sit on the borders of paranormality.
It does.
Because scientists are still studying.
They're trying to work out
the notion of this. How is this occurring?
Well, you can say that's that's fine. It's like, I don't know, the unconscious, the conscious collective, the unconscious whatever. Do you know what I mean? Because we're these organisms that have a connection.
It feels like that, doesn't it? It feels very sheldrake.
What happens when it happens to mechanical?
Well, that's very strange.
Yeah.
And look,
but
before we move there, let's have a look. There's another book this gentleman has written on music, witchcraft, and the paranormal. So I think it's well worth looking at these because as I was referencing Scott Rogo, Scott Rogo wrote the book on NAD, which is the whole ethereal music from nowhere, from no real source. And I've had that experience myself.
Yes, you did.
I know that Doug Hychek, a Grand Pooh Bar at the Untold Radio Network, has had that experience, and so have many other people. But that was the beginning of this rabbit hole that led us to this. Now, is it similar to the work of Wilhelm Reich, possibly, that there is this life force, this bioenergetic
I wouldn't be surprised
flow
at all
that occurs? Is it similar to the notion of the organ? I'm just curious about that. And what about redirecting those flows with an ethereal bioenergetic organ cannon? Here modeled beautifully by a blonde that's not looking at the camera. But how extraordinary when you think about it. So this notion, as you were speaking about before, it might be understandable on a subatomic particle level. And Einstein, this whole notion of spooky action at a distance, where particles literally, beyond the speed of light, massive distances away, light years away, seem to correspond, coordinate, and get into phase with each other. Have you noticed the conversation is like that as well?
Absolutely.
Because whether you're conscious of it or not, and most people aren't, we actually alter and modify our conversation
to fit in with other people,
the person that we're talking to, and we get into a certain rhythm with them.
That's right.
If you've got someone that speaks a lot softer and slower, you'll find yourself slowing down.
I don't usually. I get louder and faster.
Oh, do you? Well, you must be just one of those odd types.
I'm always the exception to the rule. But anyway.
You're probably highly aware of that modifying your behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, that's what becomes a really constructive conversation.
Well, it's all that stuff as well. Like, you know, a household of women will all synchronize
with their menstruation.
Their menstrual cycle will synchronize, and they're all and it's like, how does that do it? Because, you know, if you come into a household and you're sort of like, say, in the middle of your, you know, your cycle, how does your body and why does your body then synchronize to all the other women that are in the house to go at the same time?
Now, here's the interesting thing.
That they play havoc with,
they're only
your
beginning to really
stuff.
study this stuff, and they realize when people are actually having that very rhythmic, simpatico, synchronized conversation, that their neurological activity rises. They have greater cognitive ability. They have more blood flow. They're able to retain more information. They have more energy. And the larger that social gathering becomes and the more harmonious it becomes, the stress levels drop.
Right.
And that might be an evolutionary thing, because when you think about the murmuration with Starlings, now let's actually not just think about it. Let's have a little look at it.
Yeah,
If you're listening on audio, please go to our YouTube channel.
Yeah,
just
you need to
check
see
this out visually.
It's like, oh my God, what is that?
It's quite extraordinary, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah, absolutely.
How are they? They have not trained or studied this.
No, that's not a thing that they get together and say, let's see how we're going to work this one out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That was pretty amazing. I love looking at things like that.
A murmuration.
I mean, look at this one. This is just, I don't know how many birds are there, thousands of them.
Well, in Athens recently, they've been seeing tens of millions.
Is it Athens or Rome?
Yeah. So, tens of
Starlings are just kind of just millions of starlings. Just
we'll have a look at that later.
Yeah.
There's a middle, and there's 6 around.
Right.
And that bird. That bird might have, out of the hundreds
of thousands. Is that the lookout guy?
Well, they're all lookouts in a sense, because that's the notion of collective consciousness.
Yeah.
So one of them notices what could be a threat.
Yes.
Changes direction.
Of course,
the other 7 do, causing the next 7 do. And it's a domino effect.
Yes. But it's an instantaneous, it's beyond instantaneous, isn't it? You know, and how do they not smash into each other and drop out of the sky?
There is the physics.
Yeah.
You're aware that they, at a certain level, I think there might be initially at that critical transition point, there is like one of them bumps into the other. You know what I mean?
See, because you can see when it gets really dark, that means they're really close together. And then when it's lighter, they're more dispersed. You know what I mean? So they don't stay at an equal distance the whole time. It changes. But, I mean, for that many birds, you know, a lot of them would have been bumping heads if they weren't able to, synchronize it properly. Now, there was in Del Toro, what's his name? Del Toro's, the director. Guillermo del Toro. The last episode of the Cabinet of Curiosities, there is an amazing episode about these birds.
Starlings.
Yes, just birds, and this couple that are studying them in the 50s, and it's just such an amazing.
That notion of murmurer.
Yeah, and the guy, it's the guy's Rick from The Walking Dead. start in it. So I was actually quite, if you like that sort of thing and you like a bit of scary, that's definitely have a look at the last episode of the Cabinet of Curiosities.
Okay, so we'll give you a new feeling for Hitchcock's interpretation of what birds can do.
Exactly. Anyway.
What's the biomusicality aspect of entrainment? Well, that all has to do with rhythm.
Yes.
And again, the notion of the brain to actually have a higher cognitive function with music. You know, when people have a stroke, they can actually sing before they can articulate words.
Some people never speak again, but they sing their,
but what they noticed is that not all of us, and all of us have had those moments where conversation flows freely or conversation becomes awkward. And that means you're not actually matching rhythm. And in a sense,
that's when people do a runner.
That's when you realize the person you're talking to might not be suitable for you to be engaging in too close a personal behavior with because they aren't matching you for a reason. And so it's fascinating in that regard that notion of entrainment can actually be a very strong intuitive link to survival.
Right.
And so what we're seeing there in the murmuration with the Starlings is basically survival.
Yes.
And they will survive far much better in a cluster of birds than they will in singularity.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, next predator up on that level steps in, it's going to be a bit freaked out by the size of that thing.
You're the dinner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So, but when it starts to occur in the non-organic world, what have we got happening there?
There you go.
Isn't that astounding?
And so for the people that aren't watching, they're just listening, there was 5 metronomes that were all set at different speeds, and they started them off. And you could hear it was just a cacophonous, you know, all over the place.
Random.
And eventually, you know, by a minute time, they all synchronized and were going at the same speed. So, you know, I understand that in organic, you know, animals and humans and stuff like that, but in inanimate, you know, objects like metronomes.
Well, obviously what we're looking at here is an incredible natural law that is highly consistent.
Yeah.
And it was discovered in 1666 by a noted physicist, Christian Higgins.
Yep.
And he noticed that a group of pendulums were doing that. That's
pendulum clocks,
Yes.
Yep.
And, you know, that used to happen in our house because my father was a clocksmith and basically there was so many clocks with pendulums.
Yes.
And they would all reach a point of syncing.
Yeah.
And they stayed there.
Yeah.
And I have to thank for that small piece the BioSoul Integration Center and the Network Life Center. Please go and look them up on YouTube. They have had so few hits, and yet they're onto it. They're onto it from a physical healing perspective, which is another angle to take this, because it's about, when it comes to the biomusicality of entrainment, it's actually about getting the physical systems of the body into sync.
Well, the whole thing about, music soothing the savage
binaural
beast.
Beats. Binaural beats in the ear can actually synchronize your respiration with your heart rate. This is
a good thing.
Incredibly healing. Let's check out one doctor who's done that research.
Okay, very interesting, Dr. Cash. So how does this music have an effect on the body? How does it work, essentially?
Well, Chris, it's actually a very simple process called rhythmic entrainment. And rhythmic entrainment was discovered in the 1600s by a physicist in Holland. And what it means is that when two bodies that each vibrate are in close proximity, they tend to synchronize. So in this instance, the music on the headphones that I have chosen after about 20 years of research on this, the music has a slow, steady pulse. And when the patient has this music entering their brain through the 8th cranial nerve, which is the ear to the brain, the heart rate and the breathing synchronize with that slow, steady music. And when that happens, the relaxation response begins. And the patient loses a lot of the tension in the muscle, and it begins to stabilize the blood pressure, the heart rate, the breathing, and much less extraneous medication is needed. Now, they'll still have anesthesia, they'll still have pain medication, but they won't need nearly as much thanks to the process of rhythmic entrainment having been started through the music.
Fantastic.
And you see, that's, again, we can go to the Eastern notions of mysticism there, and things like the chi, and, the chakras, and we're looking at something very similar. But it's all about, and again, too, I can even go to the situations here and go to Gita Board and think about, derive the notion of actually being alive in the moment and highly aware. When you think about the binaural beats, it's like neuro-linguistic programming. When you are actually able to link your heart rate up, your breathing, your respiration to a visual monitor, and therefore you can visually control what's happening to your organs. You can drop your stress rate, you can raise your dopamine level. And this is what entrainment is about. But what I honestly believe is that entrainment is telling us that everything is connected.
Absolutely.
And we need to be in harmony with each other because it's better for our health, understanding, safety, involvement, adaptation. It is the only way to go. And as we have heard stated before, it's also being able to rely on what's already inside. Not being told what to do, but by being able to gather evidence and approach that as a community, as a whole, where we can make one brilliant decision based on the surrounding evidence, not one decision based on the surrounding misinformation.
That's by one
which
person.
Is the broadcast system primarily, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Now let's have a look at Athens.
In recent years, huge flocks of roosting birds have become a common sight in many cities, but nowhere do they reach the numbers seen in Rome. Here, they have become a super swarm that gets bigger year on year. 10 million starlings flock together to create the most astonishing aerial display in nature.
Yeah.
10 million, and I got that wrong because my wife is Greek, and I keep going back there. I keep going back there.
It's not, it's
So
Rome. Yeah.
But 10 million.
10 million of them.
And visually, that is one of the most beautiful things you can imagine.
Amazing.
So pop that into the search engine and check out all that material, which I'm sure most of you are well aware of in training.
Yeah.
Hello, members. This is Chris. I have a cool news flash from the Untold Radio Network. Starting this May 2024, members of the Untold Radio Network will be receiving special after-hours show content notifications, plus a chance once a year to hang out on camera in a webinar setting with your favorite podcast personalities. And because we have 12 different shows, it means that each month you will get to meet different podcast hosts. This face-to-face meeting will allow you to discuss anything, ask questions, offer content suggestions, and get to know all of our hosts personally. Plus talk to them face-to-face through the magic of YouTube Live. Again, this is for members only. And don't worry, you will be notified well in advance of a simple sign-up reservation for that particular host or hosts. Plus, member-only after-hour shows will be available in our reserved members-only section on YouTube. Each podcast will be producing at least one after-hour show or more per year, and one webinar meet and greet per year. We sincerely thank you for being a loyal listener of your favorite Untold Radio Network shows and becoming a loyal member. Other perks include you getting top priority in chat, guest interactions, plus getting the answers to your great questions from our hosts and guests. There is even more perks to members, exclusive wallpapers, special discounts on books, merch, and more. So stay tuned for new announcements. This is Chris, signing off from the Untold Radio Network. We will be talking soon.
Even though I don't know who Chris is, and I'm not sure if Chris even is.
Yes, Chris, I think he is.
I think he's playing into the role of entrainment there, because we're all getting into sync here on Untold Radio. And, you know, one day what will happen is every single show will just be the parallel hominid. That's the in sync we're moving towards. It keeps building and building and building.
Absolutely.
Mapping Bigfoot. And I think we've got the fastest half hour now for Bigfoot on that. Check out all the other podcasts. Dr. Dean Bertram, they are incredible. Barnaby, they're just, the paranormal one is not getting the hits it deserves. And boy, does it deserve that.
Absolutely.
The Elfin Kingdom, the Greek lady, was fabulous.
She was
on
fabulous,
that.
wasn't she? Yeah.
Yeah. So, look, science, as I said, is still in.
Well, Western science is still catching up to, trying to catch up to a lot of, old, the Eastern philosophies and stuff like that. It's just.
Well, at one point there, mysticism and science were the same thing. And I think what we're finding out now, when we realize neurologically that we're unsure where consciousness sits, that something else is going on here.
Well, it's like, because science, Western science is, you measure things empirically.
Reductionistic.
And if
you can't
on some of these subjects, you can't do it. It just doesn't happen. So what does that mean? That you just discount, all these things and just don't take any notice of them, never look into them? You have to,
Of course.
Anyway.
And I think it is absolutely imperative that scientists look into them. And when they do look into them, they begin to realize there's a bigger playing field than we've been.
Collective behaviour is all around us. We see bird flocks, fish schools, animal herds. And what really defines these systems is that there's no global orchestrating power. The individual units are locally communicating with each other, and yet remarkably through these types of communication, we get animal groups being able to synchronize their motion and respond to predators in a way that we just couldn't possibly imagine. We're still fairly bad at predicting collective behaviors. And one of the reasons is that there are many emergent properties that you don't necessarily expect based on the individual components. And that's why Many of these systems, even relatively simple organizations like schools of fish, are so mysterious to us. Schooling fish have become a very powerful organism for us because, like all other vertebrates, they have to solve many challenges. They live in a dangerous environment that's unpredictable, and they have to take in this complex sensory information and translate that into movement controls. And we don't really understand how these organisms do that. When we observe animals like schooling fish, often their responses to each other are extremely fast. It's like a blur when we watch it. But if we use modern technologies like high-speed video, we can slow time down. We can track the motion of individuals hundreds of times per second. And we can then use computational techniques to understand how each individual takes in this complex sensory information and then translates that to movement decisions in, fractions of a second.
They're scared of something here, eh?
Yeah, exactly. That gives us, for the very first time, the data we need to try to understand how the emergent collective behavior arises from the interactions among the individual components of the system. The technology we're developing here is like building a microscope to see inside these collective systems in ways that we couldn't before. What we've built here is a much larger tank than people have previously used. And so what we're forced to do is actually to have a 4-camera system where the cameras are time synchronized with each other. By stitching these 4 images together, we get this super resolution, slow motion video footage of how the behavior occurs. And so we can begin to understand these waves that cross the group when predators attack. We can begin to understand much better how individuals process sensory information.
So I'm going to leave that there, but I think you should go to biographics. Their work is astounding. I don't want to step on their work at all, but I needed to pop that piece in there to say this is really recent science.
Yes.
But I think it's really sad and devastating that we have to reverse engineer nature.
Yeah.
And not just intuitively go with the flow. What nature is screaming at us in terms of entrainment is that we are part of nature, part of the natural law is that we should be working in harmony with each other. And that we are nothing without each other.
This whole thing that these corporations have told us that you as the individual is the most important person in the world. No, you're not. There's 8 billion of us. You're not that special.
And imagine what we can do when we work together, live together.
Look at the things
we're in the midst of our housing crisis, and I'm going to live with my niece.
Yep. Absolutely.
And that's the only way I can
We're
survive.
going to be able to survive. You know what I mean?
So we have to pull together as a family to get through this. To try and do it individually is becoming impossible.
It's getting harder and harder. And that's what happens with these, nowadays. People are becoming more and more isolated. It's like they're floating in this huge ocean and there's just nothing around them and there's sharks swimming around under them.
Well, the sharks now are the extraordinary connectivity of dealing with everyone's minutiae and the minute details of the banality of each other's lives and our threat of our insignificance and the shade we throw on others. The whole notion of,
to make ourselves
to
feel
be
better.
cancelled or not.
I know.
So I think entrainment is fascinating. We see it in our everyday lives. I would certainly love to visually have a look at those Starlings. It's just mind-boggling. But it's also there in ballet. It's there in every musician's performance in a band.
For sure.
It is when we work together. And we work together on something. It's absolutely beautiful.
It's poetry.
Harmony occurs beyond what we understand neurologically, in our physicality, what we think of the limits of our body. And looks like it is a common, consistent law on this beautiful planet that I should call Gaia.
Yes.
And with that, we're doing a short podcast because we've got to go back to packing thousands of film reels, thousands of books, and carrying the weight of our materialism onto the next chapter of our life.
Well, no, we're actually not. We're actually, what we're doing is we're decluttering our life
to the most extreme extent ever.
And we are, we're going to pass on the things that need to be passed on to people. We're going to sell the things that we can sell that we don't need anymore, pass it on to someone else.
We're going to give things to people.
We're going to give things to people that need to be given to them and just, live a little bit more. Because
look, the wheel goes down, the wheel goes up. John Eyre was quite ill there. He's back at work in the salt mines. He's a happy man.
Absolutely.
What other man on the planet would be happy to go back to the salt mines? That guy has been dying, chomping at the bit to get there. I want to know where Catherine Four Feathers is. I've sent her a couple of messages. Hopefully she's well. Yeah. But we all go through critical transitions.
Yes.
And so I don't know really where this podcast is.
We come through them. We come through them. That's what you do. I mean, you either come through it or you die.
Well, I mean,
they're your two options.
Watch this space. It could be either coming up in the next few weeks.
We will come
in a way, it's a visual diary of what we're going through too.
And it'll be so much better. You know what I mean? It'll feel different. A lot lighter. Well, it'll be good. Because you go through stages in your life. You know what I mean? Yeah, you do.
You do.
And now it's time to,
feel that rhythm.
I can feel it.
I can feel that rhythm in my heart, that rhythm in
we were in sync before we even met.
Yeah, well, that scares me. You know what another name for that murmuration with the Starling?
What is it?
The Black Sun.
Really? Why is that?
With the two ends. I've got no idea.
Oh, okay. There you go.
But it's just
we do learn something every day, don't we?
So go home, buy a couple of metronomes.
Yeah.
Hit them off at
separate times and watch them synchronize.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or get a few pendulum clocks and set them up in your home and watch them synchronize.
And we hope we've synchronized with you today, no matter what time it is, no matter where you are in the world.
Yeah.
It is a privilege for us to even have time with you in our lives. So thank you for welcoming us into your personal space.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be back next week, hopefully, with an interview about water.
Yes. Oh,
H2O, and the UFO.
Yes.
But if that doesn't happen, we'll still have someone
we'll
pick up at our sleep.
Something.
Or you can just continue the saga of the soap opera of Aspasia and J-Cats and where we're headed.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be able to build a great studio and get the lighting a little better.
Oh, the lighting's not too bad.
It's not brilliant. We had a thunderstorm before, didn't we?
We did, and it stopped. All right. We'll be back next week. See you then.
Take good care.
Bye.